Hello and welcome back. In the previous lesson, we left off where I was logged in as the admin user, which had no rights, so I was not able to access any features or functionality of Amazon Web Services. So I now need to go back to the root account and grant permissions to the admin user. So to now go back to and log in as the root user, all we need to do is I'll switch back to my other tab here, click on Sign into the console. And you will notice that after you log out as an IAM user and then click on Sign into the console, you may have a slightly different login page than you do when you logged in originally as the root user. So all you need to do here is just click on this link here, sign in as root account credentials. So I'm now logged back in as the root user, and I can now access again all of the features and functionality. So I'll go back to IAM. And now let's take a look at policies, because it's going to be policies that drive how we give access to users, groups, and eventually other services through the use of roles. So let's click on policies here, and let's also click on policies down here on the Orion papers. So let's just look quickly at what policies are. So policy is a document that formally states one or more permissions. By default, and this is very important to understand, by default, an explicit deny on a policy always overrides an explicit allow. So what do we mean by that? That means that if I have a policy that states that somebody has access to S3 and I assign that or give that to somebody, then I have another policy, and that policy denies access for anybody that it's attached to, access to S3, and I attach both of those policies to the same user. So one user has a policy that allows them or grants them access to S3, and another policy that denies them access to S3. If both of those are applied at the exact same time to the same user, the user will not be able to access S3. A deny always overrules an allow, as is extremely important to understand as part of this course and as learning to be a solutions architect in Amazon Web Services. So what does this do, this feature, the ability for an explicit deny to override an explicit allow? Well, this allows for the use of a deny all policy to quickly restrict all access that a user may have through multiple attached policies. So let's say that a user has 10 different policies that are attached, giving them various levels of access to different AWS services. And let's say that now this particular user, let's say that they've left the company or they've been fired, or for some reason you just want to, in one quick step, remove all access that they have. Instead of having to go through and remove all 10 policies, you can just attach a deny all policy, just one policy, and here is an example of that policy. You can do that extremely quickly, and that would instantaneously prevent them from accessing any AWS services in the account. And if you ever then wanted to just restore the access that they have, instead of having to go back and add in all those 10 policies that they may have had attached, you can just remove the deny all policy, and the 10 policies that are still attached to their account, granting them those various levels of access, will then work again. And a nice thing about policies is that when you grant them or take them away, it's instantaneous. So the second that I put a deny all policy on someone's account, they immediately lose all privileges. There's no waiting period on that. And then the second I remove it, they immediately then have all of that access and privilege again. So let's just take a look at these two policies, because these are examples of what the policies actually look like. So here's an IAM policy, an example of the admin policy. So if you see here, we have a statement, and then statement, there's an effect, and the effect here is allow. So this is an allow policy, and the action here is designated with a wildcard with a star here, and that just means everything. So we're basically saying allow all actions on all resources. Obviously, as an admin, you want access to all resources within AWS, so this effect allow, action everything, resources everything. So this is our administrator access policy. Now, if we take a look at a deny all policy, it's the same thing, just instead of the effect being allow, the effect is deny. So effect deny all actions on all resources. So again, if we were to put both of these policies onto one IAM user, that user, now you should be able to remember and figure this out by now, that user will not have any access to anything. Because if you remember, a deny policy always overrides an allow policy. So let's continue talking about policy. So IAM, one of the nice things about it is it actually provides a bunch of pre-built policy templates to assign to users, groups, and some of these examples include administrator access, which we looked at here, power user access, which is administrator access except it does not allow users or group management. So if you have somebody that you want to give rights to use all the services, but you don't want them to be able to manage users or grant or restrict policies, then you want to give them power user access. Then there's also something like read-only access, and that allows people to only read, let's say, items in an S3 bucket. So they can't create buckets, they can't upload to buckets, but they would be able to read items and download items that are in an S3 bucket. And what we see over here under policies is the full list of the pre-built policies that AWS has provided for us. So if I type in admin, we will see here that the top result here is administrative access. So this policy right here is represented as this policy here. You can also look at S3 full access, or S3 read-only access. So again, if you just wanted someone to be able to read from S3, you could assign them this policy. And we can click on that and we can take a look at what the policy and how it's actually written. So here we see that effect allow, so we're allowing access to something. Action, instead of it being all actions, is being restricted to just get actions and list actions in S3 for all resources in S3. So as you'll see here, this is something that gets a little more granular than an all-out admin access. So you can start to see how for various different policies, there starts to be a lot of granular things that you can do with granting permissions. So another nice thing is that you can also create custom IAM permission policies using the policy generator or writing them from scratch. So to do that, we can click back on policies, click on create policy, and here we can use the policy generator, which we select on that. We can select things like allow or deny. So let's say we want to select allow. We can select a service, let's say co-deploy, for example, set actions, all actions, or say that we just want to allow somebody to batch get deployments. And then we would have to add here the Amazon resource name, or the ARN, which I will describe and touch on in a minute here. So I would fill this out, click next steps, and then it would build that permission for me. And so this is a really nice feature because then I didn't have to write it from scratch myself. But if I cancel that and go to create policy again, I can create my own policy, giving it a policy name, a description, and then typing it in here and the layout just as you would see here. And this is really nice because you can validate the policy here to make sure that the formatting is correct and that everything is written properly. And it's a really great tool to use here to come in and experiment with different types of policies. There is also the policy simulator. Now, the policy simulator, what that allows you to do is run tests based on the policies that you've written to make sure that they work, or if they don't work, or if they're restricting the right types of access or granting the right types of access. So these are really cool tools that you can use here in identity and access management, specifically for policies. So moving back, we've now covered most of our items here on policies, but there's a few more that we want to touch on. Next is that more than one policy can be attached to a user at the same time. That's very important to understand. Any user can have any number of policies attached to them at once. So you can have one policy that grants S3 access, you can have another policy that grants EC2 access, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 policies can all be applied to one IAM user all at the same time. Also, policies cannot be attached to AWS resources such as EC2 instances. So policies can only be attached to users and groups. They cannot be attached to things like AWS services. So an EC2 instance cannot have a policy attached to it. Now, there may be times when the EC2 instance will need permissions to access, say, an S3 bucket, but there's a different way that that occurs, and we'll get to that in another video. So now that we understand a little bit more about policies, we still have the issue of needing to grant permissions to our admin user. And we will do that in the next lesson, the very next lesson. So with that, we will conclude this video for now. Thank you for watching. You may now move on.